Hello and welcome to episode number 7 of Fablebreakers. This week we are thrilled to be talking with Sarah Fenstemaker, a young musician from Ohio who is currently working on her first EP.
Sarah is going to be discussing where her music and inspiration come from, as well as some of the adversity that she's overcome in relation to her art.
My name is Jake Romano,
And I'm Carly Racklin.
and we're here to take the myth out of making something meaningful. It was funny, I had a barbecue recently, and this little old guy named Guido, who my family has known for such a long time, little Italian guy, came up to me, and he has a very soft voice. He came up to me, first time he had seen me in a while, he goes, essentially he said I sounded like a woman, and that he was like, you sound just like me. Every time I order a pizza, people think I'm a girl. And I'm like, thanks, Guido, I really appreciate that.
Didn't you just tell me that?
I think I probably recently told you that I
called you Miss.
Oh, that happens all the time, constantly. Oh my gosh, it's awful.
Oh.
It's alright. I'll live. I have to live with it. There's worse things that I could pick on about myself. So, all right, you guys all ready to kind of jump in here? We want to know what you're listening to right now. What music you're listening to? Like, what's in your music library that's kind of inspiring you right now, and like what genres of music are you kind of drawn toward in general?
I like a lot of the lo-fi music, odd hipster kind of experimental stuff. And I also like the big dramatic orchestral music like Paloma Faith or John Newman or Miss Lee, or it's a big contrast, and there's a pretty big mix in there.
I know you listened to Aurora for a while. That was probably right.
Yeah, I love her.
She has a neat style. Carly kind of listens to a little bit of experimental. I think the one band that you always mentioned to me.
Comrades?
No, the other one.
Oh, was it Radical Face?
Yes, that's it. Radical Face.
Yeah.
Sarah's face didn't light up. Okay, you don't know who they are. They're kind of they're kind of experimental.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of indie. It's just one guy and a band that he has, but it's Radical Face is the name for the group, or kind of his stage name, kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But
yeah,
really cool, interesting indie music that's like he has a lot of concept albums, and I just love the idea of concept albums and music that tells a story, like a really defined story.
Yeah.
And it's just really cool. I love his music.
Yeah, he's neat. I started listening to him at work and stuff, and he's really cool. It's actually really neat because a while ago, I know you were listening to Aurora, Sarah, and it's funny because I think that might have been probably like a year ago, maybe like a year and a half ago, when you were like posting a lot about her, and I don't know, it was just neat to see that journey, like from this place of where you like were really involved with her music and like listening to it, and then I feel like you were so inspired that you had to grab it and do it yourself, you know? I don't know if that's the way it went, but I mean, that's kind of how I saw it as an outsider, if that makes any sense.
Kind of, yes. I don't listen to her as much as I used to because I listened to her songs so much that I got a little bit sick of them. Because I listened to her and nothing else for so long. But she is so inspiring to me in that she's just so herself, you know? She's so eccentric and okay with it. And that just help jumpstart my own lurking originality.
Well, that seems to be something too that like I see the connection between what you were taking from her and in your own work, and something I always look at in her is she has this like little dance that she does when she sings, and like I just think that's so cool, and you've brought those kind of very original elements and unabashed elements kind of into your own work. I love your music. You should know you're talking to, at least I'm like one of your biggest fans. You know, I like freak out every time you post something.
I don't understand how that is, how? What?
Part of it is like, so I just like love my friends so much. I think about all those big artists that musicians, writers like Carly, just like they all started somewhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
They all started just, oh, you think about someone like Owl City, who's like one of my biggest influences. Like he started out on MySpace. Like he started out on MySpace. Like how many artists started out on MySpace, and it was just their friends that were like, you can do this. You're making something special. That's so important to me, and that's why I love to encourage my friends, because I love to be a part of that beginning for people.
Honestly, Owl City is a huge inspiration for me too.
Really? Oh, that's so cool.
Like I think about how I have such minimal recording equipment and everything, and I work in a tiny little office, and I've always really loved him. Yeah.
So in our previous episodes, we've talked a lot about fear, mental health, in the episode with Amy, and especially self-doubt. That seems to be something that reoccurs. These are the things that stop us dead in our tracks. Stops us from creating. What would you say is your biggest adversary, your biggest roadblock when you're achieving your goals as a musician? Is it something that's external, like other people or limitations getting in your way, like you don't have enough money for equipment? Or is it something internal, like creative block or maybe even anxiety? What's your biggest foe?
It's a mix of self-doubt and a huge ego. And I'm so afraid of failure. And I feel like, I don't know, it's just I'm so confusing in my own head, because I'm just so perfect to myself. And yet at the same time, I absolutely suck. I don't know why I create anything.
So it sounds like it's internal.
Yes, very much so.
That's such a weird contrast to have. You realize that's weird, right? Because some people are so, like, they have that self-doubt, but you seem to have this other side where you're actually, like, geeking out and you're, like, excited about how, what you're creating, which is kind of rare. What an interesting turmoil to have.
I know.
Has that ever stopped? Like, has the bad voice in your head that tells you suck, has that ever stopped you, like, entirely? Like, has that made you scrap a song entirely? Or do you usually push past that?
I have scrapped multiple songs because of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm just so afraid of being made a fool of, I suppose. I have my own weird standards that I have to stick to, even if nobody else thinks that they must be adhered to.
Mm-hmm.
Well, what was interesting to me was the idea of, like, the inflated ego fighting with the self-doubt. Because you said that you listed the ego as kind of the adversary to your creativity.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering, like, how that manifests itself, because the way you described it, it seems like you're able to be proud of yourself, and that, I think, is a good thing when you're creating, because so much of the time it seems like we just make something and we're immediately like, nope, that's terrible. And maybe you have that voice, but you also have a voice that says it's good. And I'm wondering if the ego part of it is almost like you hold yourself to too high of a standard. I don't know exactly how to word it.
I do understand. It's kind of, I want to achieve perfection, and I feel like I have to achieve perfection, but then in the end, I just can't. So then I feel like I have to give up because I can't achieve perfection. And then I think, you can't just give up. You have to keep going. And then I'm just already so sad and depressed that I make some sort of piece of crap music. And then I'm like, no.
Yeah, it's interesting that you have, like, that. It's funny that you called it an ego. Maybe that's, like, your muse, like, patting you on the back and saying you're doing a good job. I don't know. We all, I wish I had an ego that was patting me on the back and telling me I was doing a good job. That would be nice. Yeah, that's so interesting that, and I'm glad that you do overcome that other voice that says what you're doing is junk, because it's not, and we get music in the end, which is nice.
Well, thank you. At the same time, though, society is normalizing depression and self-hate in a way that is good.
Yeah.
But also in a way it enables people to feel more like it's okay to not fight.
Mm-hmm.
So I will feel the ego, and I will think, oh, this is a bad thing. This isn't good. I shouldn't be feeling this way. Yeah. So I feel like I have to suppress the good voice and turn to the bad voice, and then it just goes downhill from there.
That's so interesting. So I guess that it kind of answers my question, and that it is internal. I can't imagine, someone creating and not having any of these kind of issues. It seems like there's always, and it's something we've talked about even from the first episode, about how there's always this little war kind of happening where we're always conflicting with ourselves, and maybe that's part of, being a creative person. Like, it's just, intrinsic to being creative is this war you're having with yourself where you're trying to make something better and you don't know if it's good enough.
I feel like, because we keep having this conversation about why does it seem like all the creative people we're talking to, it always comes back to like the self-doubt and the bad voices and stuff like that. That seems like we cannot separate that from ourselves and what we create, no matter what we do. And I feel like it has to do with the fact that creative people we're all creating, and we're pulling the things that we create kind of out of ourselves. Mm-hmm. Everything always comes from something internal. And to do that, we kind of just have to open the doors in ourselves for voices, for inspiration. And I think when we do that, we can't really stop the bad voices from coming out. Also, it's just like when you go searching in yourself for things to write about or sing about or draw or anything, there's no filter. Everything is going to come out, and you're going to have to sift through everything. And the negative stuff comes out with the good stuff, and we have to work with them both. So, Sarah, I think that's something that you're really good at addressing in your music. So, like, I just recently listened to your song Red Eyes on YouTube, and it touches on the topic of fear and inner turmoil, and it brings issues of mental health to light too, and that's really, really cool and important. And you're externalizing those struggles, as other writers might do through stories, like Amy, one of our last guests, or through visual art like Jake has done. Do you think that is a way that artists heal? Is that a way of fighting our inner demons that can have outward real world effects by taking them out and putting them into our art?
Yes. I have been finding it to be very effective. The more I have been putting my own demons out into my music and then putting it out into the world, they lose their scariness. They lose their power because I have put them out of my head and into a bigger place.
Yeah. Something I wrote about recently. I don't mean to toot my own horn, but I think it's important to take the things that you're scared of. I recently wrote a comic piece about this, about how when you're afraid of something, it's actually, instead of trying to pretend like it doesn't exist, you actually give it a form, like as in a literal form. Like you give it a hands and feet, and you in all this is in my head, but you're actually taking that a step further. I love that song. That's a really neat song.
Thank you.
You did release one last night, right? I think
I released it this morning, I think it was.
But yeah, most of your work seems kind of like, I don't want to say dark, but it's kind of like brooding. Like, it's kind of it's very like low and almost echoey. And it's so different, actually. Like, your recent stuff is different, I feel, from stuff that you were putting out a couple months ago, where it was like a little bit more light and playful. Is there a reason for that transition at all?
Well, stuff has been going on, and I have just been bombarded more with my own insecurities, my own demons, and I've been feeling more angry, and I needed to vent it. And in the process of trying to write songs, all that was coming out was my own fears and all my struggles, and it's like I couldn't stop it. I would try to write about lighthearted things and make my songs more boppy and fun, and I couldn't do it. It just it was not happening.
Yeah.
The one song, Rest Easy, is about one of my closest friends who went through a really, really tough time about a year ago, and it kind of made me realize how much I truly care about her and how much I just completely love her, and if anything happened to her, I would be so devastated. So then I wrote that song as kind of a consolation for her, as to kind of help her through her troubles, I guess.
Yeah.
I'm stuck on the idea of the writing or producing art that's dark.
Yeah.
And and how like you were like hesitant to say it as if it's kind of a bad thing, and in my mind it's one of those things that I've kind of gotten over, because you could say that a lot of my writing is really dark.
Okay.
And it just reminded me of this poem that I like. It's very short, so I kind of want to read it.
Please do.
It's called Why Are Your Poems So Dark by Linda Pastan. And I found it on Twitter recently, and I was like, oh, this is amazing. And I think it, I don't know, just puts this kind of stuff in perspective. Like, why do we write about sad things? So if we want to get a little artsy, I'm going to read it really quick. So, why are your poems so dark? Isn't the moon dark too, most of the time? And doesn't the white page seem unfinished without the dark stain of alphabets? When God demanded light, he didn't banish darkness. Instead, he invented ebony and crows and that small mole on your left cheekbone. Or did you mean to ask, why are you sad so often? Ask the moon. Ask what it has witnessed. And that's the poem. I don't know, like, it's just that kind of thing. You might ask, well, Sarah, why do you write dark music? Carly, why do you write dark stories? And it's just kind of that thing, like, because there's dark things in people, and it's better to externalize them in art in that way, because then we talk about the things that we've witnessed, and then we can address them and take care of them and get them outside of ourselves and stop them from consuming us, like Sarah has with her music. And I think that's an important conversation to have about art that people are kind of afraid of having, because they're afraid of seeing something sad or brooding or dark, and they just think it's bad, and that it glorifies the dark thing, which some art does, and I think we need to be careful about that. But I think as a whole, it shouldn't be discarded as like a wrong way to heal.
That's a really cool poem. I'm so glad you had that on hand. What a neat sentiment.
This conversation just made me think of it, and it's such a good poem.
So you're pretty young. I think you're at least younger than me and Carly. How old are you? You're 17, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah, that is a little bit younger than me. Some people might have us believe that our best work is found when we've kind of aged out and we've perfected our craft for years, and we kind of refined what we're doing. Do you think that your youth, or like youth in general, kind of works against creative people, or does it work for us?
It works against us in some ways. I think only in that people tend to take youth less seriously, because we have not had the many years of experience that an older person would have had. But they forget that although we're young, we still feel things, and we still know things, and we still have talent, and we still have gifts, and we still have had experiences. I have had plenty of experiences that I can draw inspiration from, and I have been creating music since I was a toddler, so I still have over a decade of experience. And art isn't bound to age. Art is art. And as long as there is passion, it is worth something. Being young has no influence on how good your art is.
There are some technical things you're not going to be able to do when you're younger, right?
Yeah.
But I like what you said about something being passionate, and this is something I think about a lot too, and I always try to find, like, what's the thread through every beautiful piece of art that I can find, and usually a very, very common thread is passion. If I see two pieces of art, whether they're modern art, whatever, everyone always likes to, throw out modern art, but because there are some modern art pieces that I really love, and there are others that I don't, and I try to look for that distinction, and usually the distinction is passion. When somebody's passionate about something, no matter how, like, ugly it is, like, visually, like, that passion still shows through. You think of something like Jackson Pollock. Some people say, oh, there's no skill to that, there's no craft to that, but, like, look at those things, they're full of passion, and although it's not a beautiful landscape, it doesn't look like something realistic, there's still that thread of, like, beauty in it, because he was throwing 1,000,000% of himself into those paintings. So
Exactly.
I like that you mentioned that.
I'm just remembering, I think I hear this a lot when people talk about modern art, like, and I'm usually pretty, or I used to be really critical of modern art because I could just look at that and be like, why is that there? It's just a little scribble, like, who cares? But you always hear, like, someone talking about modern art in a museum and they're like, oh, look at that, a 2-year-old could do that, I could do that. Well, you didn't, and this person did, and it's up in a museum, so sit down and shut up.
It's funny. I should have brought this up with George too, because to a pretty large extent, I think we disagree a lot about what makes modern art beautiful. I don't know. Just thinking back, that's something that would have been an interesting discussion.
When you're making art, you put meaning into every little bit of it. So I look at a piece of modern art and I see so much woven into every single part of it. Even like I see modern art online and there will, for example, just be a canvas and it's all blue and people will be saying, what is the point of this? And I'm seeing a big sky or an empty soul or a deep lake with dreams beneath or something.
Mm-hmm.
I read so much more into it, so I'm able to appreciate it more. And I think that's the point of modern art, that you interpret it your own way. I used to hate it with a passion, but I don't anymore. I've felt such a draw towards just like slapping paint on canvas lately. So
yeah, and even just talking about passion too, like if you showed me a canvas that's entirely blue, I could look at it and just think, wow, someone loves blue so much. And and then I can kind of look at that blue canvas and just think about loving blue that much, and that makes it enjoyable. That makes it worth it just to see this thing that seems really foreign, but you can somehow just feel the love for the medium and everything by just looking at it, and that I think makes it worth it to see the passion in something as simple as something totally blue.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of canvases might be empty, or something doesn't make sense at first glance, and like you said, Carly, you kind of have to dig a little bit for the meaning, and that's not digging into the art, that's digging into yourself. But yeah, that's cool.
When we do see that you talk about the closeness of music and the soul a lot, so you did mention the soul in talking about the blue canvas, and we have a quote from a blog post you made. So in the post you say, music is art, and art is meant to be limitless, chaotic. Art is meant to be made of pure emotion and tangled thought. Art is the outpouring of an artist's soul, and quite often souls are messy. So you seem really intent on making something that's like from core Sarah. I'm just interested in why music was so important for you as opposed to other art forms, because you do write, I mean, music has lyrics that are written, and you do write, stories and little things. So I'm just wondering, why was music so important to you? Why do you feel that music is this important tie to the soul?
I think that your soul and the art that you create are so deeply intertwined, because whatever you create is an expression of yourself and your deepest thoughts and your desires and your wishes and your wants. And I guess souls are part of the grand infinity of everything. They're in eternity. Souls will always be around. And music was one of the first art forms, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Angels.
Yep.
If you believe in angels, then angels sing things. And since my soul is connected to eternity, and music was at the beginning of eternity, then it all just links. And it took me until this year to be able to put that into music properly. I never felt completely comfortable with just putting my thoughts out so that people could see them or hear them. But lately, I guess I've just become so sick of holding it all in that it's just, I started bringing myself out, and now that I'm starting to bring myself out, it's just coming out in a torrent, and I can't stop it. Music is such a vent, and when people get emotional, they scream or they cry, and you can hear it, or they laugh.
Yeah.
The deepest parts of people's emotions are generally vented through noise, and music kind of channels that. It's a way for me to scream and cry and rage and laugh in a more beautiful way. And I think that's a large part of why I love it so much, because it's just a way for me to get everything out and feel good about it.
How cool.
Yeah. Now that I think about it, that makes total sense. Because, like, if you're just writing that I feel this way or that this is going on, it doesn't have the power to convey as much as hearing it can. Like, even if I make a really good metaphor that, it'll give you a hint of what something feels like, but you kind of just have to grasp at it. But with music, there's such a wide range of ways that it can influence you, because, like, there's a million musical instruments in the world, and they all have very, very distinct sounds that speak to very, very distinct parts of people. And, like, there's just that diversity of expression in music that is really difficult to reach. At least I think in writing, it's difficult to speak to all those different parts of people.
Yeah. And there's something also too that I think about with music, in the way that it's actually tied to time. Words on a page are always kind of sitting there, and even paint on a canvas, you can literally stare at it and it's gonna always be the same thing. But music's interesting because it's tied to something, to time. You can't like you pause music and it stops. Like, you don't, you know what I mean? Like, you have to experience it as it moves. It's like dance almost too. Is similar, I think, probably, because it has to move in order to work, and it can't be like stopped. Yeah.
I like that you compared it to dance, because dance has also always been a large part of my life.
Oh,
and
really?
movement is just movement has just been so inherent to everything. So when I'm listening to a song, I visualize movement, and then
cool.
when I'm creating music, I try to bring the movement into the music.
And there is literal movement in music, though. Like, you and I were talking about sheet music and stuff. You can see the shift in the sound visually, like it goes up and it goes down, and you can hear that movement too. Whereas with writing, you can describe the movement, and it's up to the reader to kind of construct it. But with music, it's already constructed for you, and it's kind of one more step forward on the in terms of, like, your immersion and your connection to it.
I didn't know that dancing was part of your
Yes.
part of your thing.
Oh, I used to be obsessed with ballet. I never got to take any classes, but I was obsessed with it. And then for a little bit, when I was about 7, I thought I was a tap dancer, but I really wasn't. I've always been such a physical person, though. From the time I was small, I was always focused on the physical. I was focused on... Everything was so sexualized to me as well. And I was so focused on how I looked, and that kind of ties into where I go with dance. It's all physical, it's all movement, it's all voice.
Yeah.
If you think about it, God spoke the world into existence.
Yeah.
And then it came into physical being, so it was sound, and then it was movement.
Yeah.
So those were the first 2 things of creation.
Oh, I love it.
That's awesome.
So those are deeply tied together.
Yeah.
And when I incorporate those, I kind of feel like I've dropped into a little bit of infinity. Like I've dropped into the vast, deep expanse that was Earth before it began to blossom and become what it is now. I'm falling into something more deep and ancient and pure and true.
That's so cool. I love to hear about that. You scuba diving in pre-Earth. How cool.
That sounds so weird now that you say it.
It's giving me a really cool mental image. I love it.
That's what it sounds like you're doing. And some of your songs kind of sound like, sonic scuba diving. Like, they're so, like, like echo. You know what I mean? Like I feel like we're spelunking
Yeah.
when we listen. It's so echoey and like kind of rhythmic, but like oozing. I don't know if that's a good way to describe it. Like you know what I mean?
I know, I
I love
agree.
that.
Yeah, it's very atmospheric.
Yeah, and you know in terms of space, it's a very. I think a lot of your songs have a very big space, like a cave kind of.
You just described that so perfectly.
Write me a song, Sarah. So earlier this year, you started to release some of your singles from your. I guess it's you're anticipating putting together a full album, right? Or is it an EP? I want to kind of get that straight. What's the end all for the collection of music that you've kind of been curating and putting together?
I've been trying to figure that out. It's kind of feeling to me like the more guitar-based songs are one EP, and then everything since that is something different.
Okay.
It should be in a different little EP or album, or just separate and alone.
Can you give us a run through of kind of like your recording process? Like, so you start with a song and like bring us through when you record and stuff. Like, how does that happen? Do you have equipment? How does it happen? How does it come together?
Well, putting together my first songs, they had a really different process than most of my work.
How are they different?
Well, my recording device that I use, I sit in front of the computer to do it.
Yeah.
So I can plug it right in and transfer everything to the editing program. So normally I'm in front of my piano, but this time I just sit in front of the computer and type random words on the screen and then just let it kind of blossom from there into a song. And then I quickly record it before I forget it. And then I try to mess around with it in Audacity and morph it into something musical, song-like.
So all that stuff is just like you sitting in front of your computer? It's not like you're sitting in a recording studio or anything, right?
I'm sitting in a tiny little dark office, frantically trying to write things down and then figure it out with a guitar or sounds that I found online. And
Yeah.
it's really rough, I guess. It's not sophisticated at all.
Okay. Do your songs typically like sound pretty different from when they start to when they end? Like the kind of I don't want to say the image, how they sound in your head, or even when you start like those first few bars just humming or whatever, like does it usually end up sounding pretty different once it's completed and you upload it and everything?
Kind of. I generally make everything more echoey and dramatic than I first envisioned. It just gets far more ooh.
I relate. I use the same program, Audacity, and I just figured out how like the echo function works. And it's like my version of auto-tune because I don't really know how to use most of Audacity, but I just like when things sound very like echoey and deep, and I feel like it just makes things better. It'll like cover up the fact that I can't sing very well.
Exactly. Same though. You just get the echoes in there, and then all the little blips and little weird parts of your voice kind of fade away into the echoes.
Then you're just paying attention to how like immense and dramatic it feels, and you suddenly forget about actually hitting notes.
Yep.
Well, now we know your secret, both of you.
That's okay. I'm not releasing any albums anytime soon.
Carly.
Do you want to talk about sellouts?
Yes, I want to talk about just a little bit about sellouts.
Oh man.
Well, I think it's important.
Here's your drama.
Because here's my drama, yeah. We're talking about being honest and kind of taking pieces of ourselves, from our soul and all this stuff. I want to get your opinion. There's probably no right or wrong answer to this question, but do you think it's possible for an artist to grow in the wrong direction? And I'm speaking specifically in terms of musicians like selling out for a more mainstream sound, for example, because that's something that I think is probably, a lot of musicians get accused of.
I think it is possible for them to grow in the wrong direction, only if they are abandoning what they love. It's not that a different sound is bad, because that is not the case at all. a different sound can be a good thing, but if they are going to that different sound for money or to appease people and not because they actually love it, then it's not a good thing. It's extremely unhealthy.
Yeah.
And it's a false representation.
Mm-hmm.
And I have seen some go for something that they didn't originally have and go for it in a bad way. There was this one girl, this one musician that I really loved, and she did this one song, and it was so incredibly stupid.
Oh no.
And it was so shallow, and the video was awful. And I was like, "Oh, honey, what happened to you?" Oh, it was the worst. And I always think about that.
Mm-hmm.
How she went from being so original, and her voice was so intriguing, and then it just got bland. It went so completely mainstream. And it's not that the mainstream sounds are a bad thing, because they're pretty cool. But I don't think she really wanted to change her music. I think she was more forced to do it because of her management. But even through that, it's wrong that she had to give up what she loved for something else to try and make the public happy. And then, even though she changed, the public was still unhappy because they were unhappy that she changed.
Yeah, yeah. It's so important to just be like honest and to come back to what your first love was. Jeremy mentioned in I think it was our previous episode, about how like when you're having art block, sometimes it's because, you know, we think about the end product all the time, but like he brought up a quote by somebody about how like if you're not happy with what you're doing, then like do something else, do something that's close to your heart, that's near and present, that's close to what convicts you. Just like drop it and run back to that thing, or run to another thing that convicts you if you feel like you're kind of lying to yourself as an artist, or you know, you're hitting a roadblock in that way.
Yeah, like I feel like what it all comes down to on the topic of selling out and convictions and stuff is when like art that's made without love and without passion isn't art, it's just lies. And people don't like being fed lies.
Sure.
And I think people can kind of sense that, and that's why it feels so insincere, and it's just not a good feeling to be given something insincere, and that frustrates people who consume art. And yeah, it's just like you don't want to be fed lies in any capacity.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. I listen to a lot of music, and I can always tell when the musician is lacking soul in their music. A lot of modern pop music lacks soul. Like you just listen to it and it's empty.
Mm-hmm.
There's no true emotion. It's so carnal, and it's not specifically that sex and things like that are bad.
Yeah.
It's just they focus on it so much that it loses its meaning.
Mm-hmm.
And it just becomes an empty repeat that's just they sound so lost in their music.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Carly, do you want to finish off with the last question?
Sure. Okay. So, Sarah, what advice would you give to artists, but specifically any musicians out there who think that they have to wait for their big break or wait until they're older to make good music? Is there anything that they can do or be doing now to help them achieve their artistic goals?
Well, don't wait. Don't wait for anything or anyone. Work as hard as you can to further your art. Release it to the public and don't give a crap about any negative responses, but keep decent criticisms in mind and then keep going. You don't get somewhere by sitting. You get places by forging a path with all your might. The harder you swing your machete at the vines, the more they'll fall away. And the more you advance and the closer you get to success with growing experience behind you. Because I myself am tempted to just sit around and wait for somebody to be like, hey, Sarah, here's a recording deal. Here's money. Here's a fan base. Here you go. But I have to work towards it. Mm-hmm. I realize that I won't get those things if I don't work for it.
Yeah.
you can't wait for a certain age and then just expect everything to come to you. You have to work and you have to produce things. You can't just sit around and wait for somebody to come to you. You have to go to them. You know, the more you wait, the farther away your dreams get, but the more you actively reach and climb towards your goals, the closer they get. You just have to make things. You make your awful art, you make your good art, and you practice and you practice and you practice and you keep going despite everything. Don't wait for a certain age to arrive, and don't wait for somebody to come to you. Don't wait for a fan base to suddenly pop into existence and beg you for content. You have to just put your soul out there and make people see it. They won't come unless you call, so you have to make art and you have to yell.
Nice. I like it.
Can we end right there?
Yeah, let's do it.
And P.S. I'm your fan base, so even if
Woo!
so there you go. There's your fan base that popped out of nowhere. Wow, that was it's pretty cool. Thank you, Sarah, for letting us into your world, not only by way of talking with us, but also by just sharing your music in general with us and just doing what you love. We are so excited to hear your first album, or EP, whatever you're going to put out. I love whenever you put something out, so I'm just so excited to hear more music, so just thank you for being awesome in that way.
If you'd like to find Sarah online, you can follow her on Instagram at edge.wanderheart, on Tumblr at You've Got That One Ring, and of course on her YouTube channel, which is And How. That's AND space HOW with an exclamation mark, where you can find her and fall in love with all of her music like we have.
And that'll do it for this week's episode. If you're into busting up fables, then you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. Follow us on Tumblr, Instagram, Facebook, or Twitter, all at Fablebreakers. Until next time, I'm your host, Jake Romano.
And I'm Carly Racklin, and you've been listening to Fablebreakers.